Are you wondering what forage crops you can grow for your livestock, especially pigs, on your farm that'll help reduce your supplemental feed costs, that will improve your soil health, and also reduce or even eliminate the need for imported fertilizers on your farm? I'm Rob from Dowdle Family Farms, and in this video, we're going to talk about cool season cover crops for our livestock. Now, the emphasis is on pigs, but these cover crops work for pigs, poultry, and cows and other ruminants as well. When I first started growing the cover crops for our livestock, I was frustrated because there was little information about growing these cover crops on a small scale. Also, most of the information was for cows and not for pigs. And while I wanted to increase the productivity of our cows and our pastures for our cows, I really wanted to supplement feed costs for our pigs. Before we start talking about the different forage crops that we can grow for pigs, we need to talk about pig nutrition. There are two things that are really important to know. First, pigs are monogastrics, so just putting them out on a grass pasture alone does not mean the pigs will thrive. They need higher proteins just like people do. Their digestive systems are much more like humans than they are cows or sheep or goats. And so they need higher protein, higher quality feeds than just grass alone. When you get higher protein feeds, though, they also require protein in very specific amino acid forms. The most recognizable is probably lysine, but there are several other amino acids that the pigs need. And just because the forage is high in protein doesn't mean that it has the lysine and other amino acids that the pigs need. Most of these crops grow really well if they have good seed to soil contact, and you can actually use the pigs to plant them. The main exception are the cereal grains and the Austrian winter peas. If you plant those, you need to plant them at a higher seeding rate because the pigs will eat a lot of the seeds and they'll miss a lot of the seeds as well. There are four different classes of cool season cover crops that we'll talk about growing. The first are legumes, then we'll talk about brassicas, then we'll include some forbs in that mix, and then we'll talk about grasses and cereal grains as the fourth group. So let's talk first about the legumes. The legumes have a high protein. Most of the time, you'll be talking about an 18% crude protein or higher. Typically, it's going to be 25% protein or so. So you get really, really good high protein levels from the clovers. By far, my favorite clover for our perennial pastures is a DURANA clover. It's an improved variety of white Dutch clover, so it grows about twice or three times as high. It spreads by stolons and by seeds, so you can graze it to the ground and it'll regrow really, really fast. I mean, it just performs really, really well in perennial pastures. In our tall fescue pastures, mixed with the DURANA clover, our cattle can easily produce 2 to 3 pounds of weight per day per animal on those pastures. It just does really, really well. The problem with DURANA clover, though, that I run into is it's a great perennial clover, but you don't really want to put pigs in it and root it up. At least I don't, because it's a little bit costlier to establish, even though it's much better in the long term and it's low maintenance. So if I'm going to plant an annual clover for especially pigs to forage on that produces a lot more biomass than the DURANA clover, I'm going to pick either one of the LADINO clovers. It's a white clover that can spread by stolons, but it has a much higher growth rate, so it grows a lot taller. It'll produce 2 to 4 tons of dry matter per acre. Of course, it has high protein, and it just produces a lot more forage for the pigs. Another tall growing type clover that I really like is the fixation Balanza clover. The Balanza clover does really, really well in wet soils. It also does really well in acidic soils. And so on our farm here, where we have wetter soils, it performs really, really well. If you let it go to seed, it'll reseed itself year after year after year. In fact, most producers say that if you let it go to seed once every 5 years, you'll have a good stand of that fixation Balanza clover. I haven't grown it for 5 years, but I have noticed that it does regrow some. But even if you don't want it to regrow, you can still graze it, mow it, bush hog it, let pigs root it up, whatever you want to do to keep it from growing back if you don't want it to reseed. Now, crimson clover is probably the most common annual clover that we grow in our area. I don't grow it as much. It will reseed itself some, but it doesn't seem to reseed itself really well in my experience. But I do like it because I can broadcast it in the spring. It grows quickly. It does not regrow as well as the Balanza or the Ladino or the DURANA clovers, but it does provide some quick growth. Now, a lot of people mix crimson clover with red clover. Red clover typically has pink flowers, despite the name. I'm colorblind. Who knows? Maybe they are really red and I'm just colorblind. But it's a lighter red than the crimson clover, which has a real dark red. And the red clover, we have a little bit that grows in our pastures just naturally, but I don't really seed it. It's not the most popular clover in our area, and I don't have a lot of experience with it. We just get a lot more performance out of the annual white clovers, and so that's why I grow them. Now, there are 3 or 4 other varieties of clover that I've heard people growing. Some of them include arrow clover. From what I understand, it does not like wet soils very well, and it also prefers sandy soils, so I don't grow it much. I do see it growing around the farm some. There's also Persian clover. I don't know a whole lot about it, though I do think we have some of it growing at the farm here and there as well. Berseem clover is another great clover that people grow. The seed cost is more expensive than some of the other clovers, so I don't really grow it much. I did grow it one year. Pigs did really well on it. Cows did really well on it, but it doesn't reseed. And the seed cost is so high that it's really just not worth growing for me. There are other clovers that work much better, but that may be an option for you as well. One of the things that I like most about legumes, in addition to their high protein content for pigs, they also have the ability to fix nitrogen from the air, put it into the soil for them to grow, but also for other crops to grow that follow them. This pasture is a perfect example of that. Last winter, we had Austrian winter peas and clovers growing in this pasture along with some small grains. And what I did is I planted warm season cover crops that require a good bit of nitrogen and grew them after it. I did not have to add any nitrogen. And between the pig manure and the nitrogen from the legumes, we got some really good pig grazing out of this whole pasture. And it was really productive, and we didn't have to add any additional fertilizer to it. That's why I really like growing legumes. So now we're going to move to an area where we have planted some brassicas, and let's check them out. So the first forage brassica that we'll talk about is rape. It's also known as rapeseed. It's a forage brassica that's really good to eat. It's kind of like collards or kale. I plant the variety called dwarf Essex rape because it is the most commonly available. It costs about $1 a pound when you buy it in the 50-pound bags. You seed it at a rate of 3 to 5 or 6 pounds of seed to the acre, so it's really cheap to grow. It's really cheap seed to buy. It's small seeded, so you don't really have to do a whole lot of work to plant it. Some varieties can produce up to 4 to 5 tons of dry matter per acre. I know Mississippi State did some tests and grew up to, I think, 11 or 12,000 pounds of a different type of rape per acre, but it can produce just a world of a lot of forage. It also survives cold weather, and it also survives warm weather. So if you plant it in the fall, it'll survive the cold weather, it'll grow in the fall, survive the cold weather, and be ready to graze in the spring. However, you do need to terminate it by grazing, mowing, disking, whatever. I usually just graze it, and then replant more forage rape, and it'll survive. That new planting will survive the warm weather. If you plant it in the fall and then grow it all the way through the summer, it'll go to seed, and you won't get a whole lot of forage production in the early parts of the summer like you do if you plant it in the spring. Another good forage brassica is purple top turnip. There are some improved varieties, but I can get purple top turnip pretty cheap from our local co-op in 50-pound bags. And so what I find that I like to do is I like to plant it in the fall, even as early as August or so. And as long as we have decent soil moisture, it'll grow. Fall planted purple top turnips form a good root. The pigs love the vegetation. If I plant it in the spring, I don't get a good root or bulb in the turnip. I just get vegetation, and the vegetation does not do quite as well. But for me, in my area, purple top turnip performs really, really well. After the pigs eat the leaves, they will eat the roots. They just don't like the roots as much. I forgot to mention daikon radish. I do grow a little bit of it in the fall because it has a big root and it grows deeply. It's great for the soil, but it doesn't produce a whole lot of forage. And it's also a little bit more expensive per acre to plant. But it is another good crop for all kinds of livestock, and it fits in that brassica family too. If you want, you can check out our video, which one will the pigs prefer, grasses, turnip greens, or turnip roots, and you can see there as well. So now we're going to talk about some other forbs. Let's go to another area of the farm. There are some forbs that you can grow like chicory, dock, and plantain. Dandelion is another one that's often grown in pastures. They have deeper root profiles, so they mine nutrients deeper in the soil profile than a lot of other forbs, legumes, and grasses can reach. They don't do really well in monocultures on pasture because pigs, cattle, and other ruminants tend to find them pretty bitter, but they will eat a good bit of it, especially to meet their mineral needs. They have high levels of nutrients for your livestock, and they perform really well if you scatter out a little bit in your pastures. So there are also grasses and small greens that are good cool season crops. The most common one that we grow are ryegrass and cereal rye, although wheat, barley, oats, and triticale work as well. They have protein contents in their forage that are as low as 4% if they go to completely to seed. But if you graze in the boot stage, just when they're starting to send up those stalks, you can get protein content ranging up to 11 or even 13%. I did read some studies on university websites that demonstrate that cereal rye in the vegetative state before it goes reproductive can produce about a ton of dry matter per acre that's about 20% protein or higher. The problem with that is you don't get nearly as much forage production per acre. We don't grow a whole lot of those just by themselves, but in a mix, they don't reduce the protein content a whole lot, and they do provide additional forage and can help increase the total dry matter per acre that the pasture paddocks produce. We tend to grow more cereal rye because it is cold hardy, and it performs really well in acidic soils, which we tend to have a good bit of. Oats, if you have a wet fall, oats can do really well if you're going to graze it that fall. They perform really well in a paddock that we had pigs on. The oats outperformed everything else in the short term, and then we turned the pigs out onto it. Now ryegrass, which is a lot of the little grassy stuff that you see growing around here, we tend to broadcast in our pastures. We overseed. It handles relatively acidic soils, and it also does pretty well in waterlogged soils. So we grow a good bit of ryegrass, and the protein content in ryegrass is in that 11 to 15% range before it goes to seed. The other thing that I haven't mentioned, with the exception of the grasses, the legumes, the forbs, and all, for the most part, they help pollinators, whether they're honeybees or native pollinators. They help them out a whole lot, especially by providing forage at times of the year that there may not be a whole lot producing. So these cover crops also work really well for pigs, but they also help your native pollinators too. If you're wondering how you can get some of these things, I would encourage you to just go to your local co-op or farm supply store. You can find a lot of wildlife mixes in the fall at your local farm supply store, on Amazon, or even Tractor Supply or something like that. I started out buying a lot of those mixes from my local co-op. They have them ready for deer hunters, and they perform really, really well. There may be some stuff that doesn't work exceptionally well in your area, but you can give them a try, and it's a great place to start with a mix without having to buy a bunch of 50-pound bags of seed. I'll include some links in the video description that you can purchase through Amazon. They're affiliate links. I'm not sponsored in any way by any of these seed companies, but if you do purchase through one of our affiliate links on Amazon, we'll get a small percentage of the commission, and you'll also get to try some different seed varieties on a small scale for your own farm. So if you want to support our channel, you can use some of our links in the video descriptions, and that would help a lot. So what cool season cover crops grow well in your area? Where are you growing your cool season cover crops? How do you incorporate them into your livestock production? Leave it in the comments below and let me know what you think. It's Rob and Snowflake from Dowdle Family Farms signing off. We hope you have a great day. Like the video, share it with your friends, and we'll catch you next time.